Influence, a premier video show where we share the success journeys of the elite and learn about the pivotal moments and decisions that shaped their paths to prominence. I'm your host, Nancy Erickson. I work with high net worth clients, business leaders, celebrities, and influencers. And I offer them a white glove, really hands on experience to write, edit, publish, market, and distribute their books worldwide. I'm the owner of Stonebrook Publishing, an award winning publishing house that publishes nonfiction books that can save lives, change lives, or transform society. Today, my esteemed guest is Dean Wegner. A West Point graduate, Dean served 7 years as a helicopter pilot and Army Ranger, and he holds an MBA in finance from Cal State. As a former Division I ice hockey player, he is highly competitive and possesses a tireless work ethic. Dean is the founder and CEO of Authentically American, a veteran-owned, American-made premium apparel brand. They're a company that celebrates patriotism, believes in the American worker, and honors our American heroes by intentionally donating 10% of profits to veteran and first responder charities. Welcome, Dean. You are truly a master of influence, and I'm so glad you're here today.
Well, this is so wonderful, Nancy, because reconnecting with an old friend, and it's, ironic that, all the way back in 2017 was looking at the direction to go professionally, that you were there helping me make that decision.
Well, I don't know how much I helped, but it's fun to see what's happened since then.
Yeah.
But before we get there, tell us a little bit about your growing up years. Where are you from and what was your family life like?
Yeah. So have been blessed with an amazing family now, and looking back in my formative years was blessed as well. So I was born way upstate New York, near the Canadian border. And I share that, Nancy, because ice hockey was a big part of my life. So I started skating at age 3, played organized hockey at 5, and played all the way through college, and still playing immense beer league now.
Wow. Yeah. So how many kids were in your family? What was that?
I had one younger brother.
Okay.
And my dad, just a good man, great American, loved our country, and just taught me the value of hard work and honesty, character, and integrity. Some, fundamental values like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you didn't come from a military family.
So my dad served for 3 years, but was not a military veteran. So enlisted time in the Army, but, didn't, serve long-term in the military, but, he spoke very fondly of his time serving our country.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about West Point. And I know there's a big nomination process, like senators or governors or something. Somebody has to get involved for you to be considered, right?
It is a much more detailed, much more extensive process than the traditional, college path. And I was really wrestling, Nancy, back then, what I want to do, where I want to go in the future, and really had 2 goals. One, was to get the best possible education I could in college. And number 2, I wanted to play Division I hockey. And what really sparked my interest, that initial interest in West Point, was when the hockey coach called and said, "Dean, we saw you at this tournament. We love your game, and we think you'd be a great fit for the Army hockey team."
Yeah.
And I did my research and did a little bit of due diligence, Nancy. And that year, USA Today did their annual ranking of the top colleges in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Guess who was number 1?
West Point.
So when you look at being able to play Division I hockey at the number 1 college in the country, not that it was an easy choice, but certainly made sense. This could be an incredible path.
Yeah. So did somebody sponsor you? Somebody in politics or in office?
So that is a great question, because that is an added level that's required for not just West Point, but any one of the service academies.
Oh.
So you need a congressional nomination. So either your local congressman or your senator needs to nominate you. And that is a whole extensive process that you go through. And I remember, as a young 17-year-old high school senior, sitting in front of a board, not sitting, I was standing, in front of a, table long full of 8,
uniformed people, or were they?
There were a couple of uniforms, but most of them were just men and women in industry who have served our country that volunteered to go ahead and help. Back then, it was Senator Arlen Specter, a fairly well-known name, from Pennsylvania, make his decision. And talk about intimidating. Here I was, a young high school senior, and here I am standing in front of all of them, and they're just firing question after question. And, through that, I was very fortunate, received a nomination and joined, West Point that summer in 1989.
Yeah. And so there's a service requirement after that, right? Is it 6 years of military service?
So the base obligation is 5 years. So it is a fully funded education. And again, it's an incredible education, one of the best in the country.
Mhm.
But one thing you do, Nancy, your senior year, you choose your branch. And I had no idea to getting there on how many different options there were. I mean, 18 different choices. So
Really? Like, really?
infantry, yes, so there's infantry, there's armored driving tanks, field artillery. There's also a lot of combat support and service support. So whether it's finance, transportation, military police, so 18 different options.
Within the Army, correct?
It's within the Army.
Yeah.
And I narrowed it down to two. So one was infantry. That is really the heart and soul of the Army. And if you want to be a general in the Army, that is likely the best path to go. The other one, Nancy, was aviation.
Okay.
And one of my favorite movies growing up was Top Gun.
Oh,
And I thought I would look ultra cool in a flight suit, and ultimately, went
it's the wrong branch, though, isn't it?
So it's still wearing a flight suit, still aviation, and it's just on the Navy side. But that was one of those influences that pushed me the aviation route.
Yeah.
But I kept wondering, Nancy, did I make the right choice?
Oh, really?
If you want to be in the Army, you want to be a general. I mean, the most general officers come from the infantry branch. And, on one end of the spectrum is infantry, special forces, rangers. On the opposite end of the Army, is the flight suit wearing aviator in that spectrum, and both critical, both incredibly important for the Army, but different sides of the Army. And I remember at flight school, Nancy, they made an announcement. The flight school commander made an announcement and said, once in a lifetime opportunity, we're going to have a competition and send one of you to Ranger School. And I thought, well, here's my chance to see,
Yeah, because talk about an elite, subset of the Army. The Rangers they're like Navy
America's
SEALs.
finest.
Yeah.
Army Rangers, Navy SEALs. I mean, that group is just the highest level of regards and the missions that they do and just everything. So I thought, well, here's my chance, Nancy, to see what it's like. And I was very fortunate, won that competition.
What was the competition? What
was primarily all physical, put, a 50-pound rucksack on your back, run 10 miles. So a lot of very physically strenuous things just to see, are you capable of handling, those level of physical demands and stresses. So I was fortunate, won that competition, had an opportunity to go to Ranger School, and it was miserable. I mean, Nancy,
tell me about that, because I've heard a lot about the Navy SEAL school and how awful their like Hell Week and stuff is. But what I'm imagining that Army Rangers are something, equivalent to that.
Well, I have obviously been to Ranger School, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But there's one person I knew, and he's fairly well known in the military community. If you've ever heard of David Goggins.
Mm-hmm. I have.
So, he has been, through Navy SEAL Bud School and also been through Ranger School.
Oh.
And they're very different. Navy SEAL is more, focused, more intense during a shorter time. Ranger School is much longer. Mm-hmm. And, I heard him say that, Ranger School, if you had to pick a choice, Ranger School is much more difficult.
Really? So what do you do during that period of time? I mean, a lot of physical things, but
yeah, I'll give you a high level overview.
Mental training too, right?
So Nancy, on day one, there were 340 of us, and there's a lot of military doctrine and tactics, but at its core, Ranger School is a leadership course. And what they do is deprive you of everything you think you need to survive, namely food and sleep, and then put you in incredibly stressful situations. So if you make it straight through in 72 days, you live on one meal a day and 2 to 3 hours sleep a night. So one meal in 2 to 3 hours, and then they put you in incredibly stressful, situations, physically, mentally, emotionally, just across the board. And Nancy, to give you an idea how demanding it is, I mentioned, we started with 340 on day one.
Right.
After 72 days, we lost 80% of our class. There were only 70 of us on graduation day.
Wow. Well, gosh, congratulations. How old were you at the time?
So This is definitely a young man's
I
school.
was just thinking that, yeah.
So I was 23 years old at that point. Had graduated from West Point, completed flight school, and then went to Ranger School. So very fortunate. I was young at that point, and arguably in the best shape of my life.
That's amazing. So, and you said 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night for how many days? 72 days?
72 days straight, and really learned two things, Nancy. One is how far your body can be pushed and how far you're capable as a human to go ahead and push to those limits. So that's one lesson that I learned. But I think the other more important one I learned is that life can be challenging. Life can be difficult, and by far Ranger School was the most difficult thing I've ever done.
Mhm.
But one thing they also do is they assign you a ranger buddy, and your ranger buddy is, as I said, is told to always be there, always have your back, always be there for you when you have a need. And my ranger buddy was, back then, it was Marine Corps Infantry Sergeant Roy Backey, and we made it straight through together. And that's one of the only reasons I made it through was Roy, and just what an incredible partner and what an incredible ranger buddy he was. And what's really neat, Nancy, 30 years later, we still keep in touch.
Well, I bet you do. Yeah. Well, that's the thing about life, period. We're not meant to go through it alone. And,
No.
either, I mean, good times or hard times, you need somebody to support you, and we need to support others and stuff. So, well, that's fascinating. I mean, it's very impressive. So then you flew helicopters, is that right?
Yes, so for 7 years served our country, so from 93 to 2000, and absolutely loved, serving our country, that camaraderie and esprit de corps, and just having that higher sense of purpose. So absolutely love those 7 years, and just some incredible memories of the, brave men and women I served with.
So you got married and had a few kids somewhere in there, right? So tell us about your family.
That
It's a
is
lot more than two children. I know that.
So that is really where it all starts for me. When we talk about priorities, for me, it lines up with God, family, and country. And literally this year, Nancy, my wife Kelly and I, we will celebrate anniversary number 30.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah.
And I'm a lot to put up with. So
Yeah.
she's a saint. We're putting up with me for 30 years. And we are blessed with four amazing kids. So we have two daughters, 25 and 22. We have a 19-year-old son, and we have a 14-year-old son we adopted from Ethiopia.
Yeah. How's
So
he doing?
he is doing amazingly well. Last week he just celebrated his 14th birthday. So we adopted a Skell in 2012. So he's been with us 12 years, and
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
he
How old
likes
was he? So he was like 2 then, right?
about a year and a half.
A year and a half. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like our own kids, he's amazing. He's loving, but he's also naughty, just like
Yeah. Well, how
biological.
did that happen? What made you want Ethiopia? I mean, how did you know the need or have the
Well, the
desire?
first thing we heard, Nancy, was a pretty shocking number. We heard the number 150 million. There's 150 million orphans in the world who don't have a mom or dad,
Mm.
who don't have a loving home. And Kelly and I heard that number and like, well, what do we do? I mean, 150 million. I mean, what can we do? And we talked and prayed about it and said, you know what? We can't adopt them all, but we can adopt one.
Hmm.
And, that's where it started all the way back in 2012. And he's been with us 12 years. And I can't even begin to tell you the number of lives that have been touched. The people have met him, heard his story, and in turn decided to adopt. Even our oldest, yes, and even our oldest daughter, Nancy, who's not even dating anyone seriously right now, has already said that she's going to adopt.
That's really amazing. Now you guys are in Nashville, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
Nashville, Music City, just an incredible town, just an incredible state in Tennessee, and a great place to raise a family and build a business.
Yeah. Well, so let's get to that business. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and how you got into it?
So let me share a little bit of background on how to get to this point, because it all starts to tie together.
Good.
Because I tell everybody now, Nancy, I'm a veteran and an entrepreneur, but when I left the Army in 2000, I couldn't even spell entrepreneur. Had no idea this world existed. And, talked about my dad being an amazing dad, and he worked for 30 years for a Fortune 500 company.
Mhm.
And that's what all of his friends, that's what all of our neighbors did. So that's the only world I knew.
Of
So
course.
when I left the Army, what did I do? Work
You
for a
went
big
to work.
company. Yeah. Worked for Procter and Gamble and Mars, brands like Crest, Tide, and M&Ms, and so thankful for that experience because they're both just world-class marketing and branding companies and learned a ton. But for perspective, P&G is a massive $80 billion company.
Yeah, that's even hard to fathom.
I mean, I can't even count that high, but I was thankful for that job and the experience, and they took great care of me. But what really drives me is wanting to know that I make a difference. And I really felt like in such a big company, just felt like a cog in the wheel. But back to not being able to spell entrepreneur, I had a desire to become an entrepreneur, but when you can't spell it, I didn't think I had it in me to start a business from scratch. So I entered the entrepreneurial ranks through acquisition and
Okay.
bought my first business in 2012. And Nancy, it's a business that you and anyone tuning in would have never heard of. But if you've been to a military parade, if you've been to a professional sporting event and they play the national anthem and you see those fancy military dress uniforms,
Yeah.
that's the business I bought.
Oh, so you made the uniforms,
You
right?
got it. So bought a government contractor that produced dress uniforms for the military,
Yeah.
thousands of uniforms every week for Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And I love that because that was
You
back.
must love that because it's back to your veteran roots, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You're still serving the country in that way.
And one thing I learned, Nancy, was the tragic history of the apparel industry, which to give you an idea how rare American made is. When I graduated from West Point in 93, over 50% was made in the US. Today it's 3.
Oh, wow.
I mean, 3% is all that's made here. And I was rather naive back then and didn't really understand how it all worked because the initial thought was, I want to win more contracts. Then I thought we'll create more jobs. But as I started to understand government contracting, I realized that it's really a bidding process.
It's all based on price, right?
And you don't actually create jobs, it's more of a job transfer. So, Nancy, if you and I are bidding on a contract and you had it before and I won, in essence, your job's transferred to me and there's no real job creation.
Of course, yeah.
And that was that light bulb moment for me that said, what if? What if instead of being a government contractor, what if we built a brand? And I thought back to the days of Crest and Tide and M&Ms. And I also thought, what if instead of what 97% of brands do and chase cheap labor overseas, what if we made the intentional choice to produce right here in the US? And that's where it started in 2017 when you and I first met and was evaluating, do we pursue this path? That vision was to build this iconic American brand. And we decided to do that from a blank sheet of paper. And in full transparency, Nancy, I'm exhausted. I mean, it's been the hardest, most challenging thing I've ever done. But, as exhausted as I am, I truly am energized and feel like we have an opportunity to make a difference.
Well, tell us more about American Apparel. Where, how do you find your workers? Where do you do the manufacturing? Who's your market?
Yeah. So I guess first and foremost, let me share, where a product is made because, for context and background, so the most common manufacturing model in the apparel industry is contracted. So Nike, for example, produces in China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, all around the world, but they don't own those facilities. It's contracted. And same model here for us, but instead of overseas, it's all very intentionally right here in the US. So I showed you one of our t-shirts on one of our last calls. People love our t-shirts. They're incredibly soft and comfortable. We produce those in Texas.
Oh, good.
Can tell a fun story about our socks, how they were, the number one seller. With recent time, we're on national TV. We produce those in North Carolina. So all here in the US, 11 different states, but very intentionally, all by American workers.
So what is in the line? Socks and t-shirts, but what else?
So think of authentically American from a brand standpoint, like a Nike, Polo, Lands' End type brand, but all made here in the US. And I say that because, we have polos, we have dress shirts like I'm wearing, hoodies, quarter zip, socks, hats, but we don't do formal dress wear. We don't do any commercial, industrial type uniforms. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the breadth of our product assortment.
Yeah. So who's your market? Is it B2C or B2B or how is that differentiated?
Well, Nancy, this is one of the lessons learned that, I wish we would have learned faster because remember that 3% number?
Yeah.
And we're being all American made. I thought everyone was like you. I thought everyone was like me, patriotic, loved our country, and I thought the fact that we were, American made and only 3% is made here in the U.S. would be a clear point of differentiation, and everyone would love us just for that fact.
I
But I
guess you found out differently.
found out two things, Nancy. One is most people don't know, where their shirt is made,
Oh.
which I'm okay with because that gave birth to our tagline, "Where's yours made?"
Mm.
It's designed to be provocative, like, "Hey, great looking shirt. Where's yours made?" And most people look at me like, "Well, I have no idea."
Yeah.
And they're shocked when they look and see made in China or made in Bangladesh. But sadly, what I've found is most people don't care.
Really?
Flat out just don't care. And I think initially I was angry. I was upset. Like, I mean, how can you not care? I mean,
Why
China.
don't you love what I love, right?
But I think from a business standpoint, finally embraced that we can't be all things to all people.
Mhm.
As a new brand in an ultra competitive apparel industry, we really need to have a niche.
Mm.
There are two sides of our business. There's a consumer side. So you can go to our website, authenticallyamerican.us. You can buy your new favorite polo, t-shirts, or socks individually. But that's where it's ultra competitive because we're literally competing against Nike,
Mm.
Under Armour, Lululemon, North Face, all these brands that have millions of dollars of marketing to spend that we don't. So we still have that, Nancy, but 90% of our revenue now is custom polos, t-shirts, and socks for businesses and charities.
Cool.
And this is where we found our niche because what we found is one group who does care is the veteran. Veterans don't want made in China. They don't want a brand like Nike. They want a brand like ours. Our biggest challenge is they don't know we exist. And if we would have talked a few years ago, Nancy said, "Well, Dean, why don't you focus on the veteran niche?" I would have said, "Nancy, I mean, that's too small. I mean, only
Actually,
1%."
yeah.
I
But
would
if
have said only 1% serve and a much smaller subset of that own businesses. But as we did our due diligence, looked at the numbers, we realized the numbers are astounding. There's 400,000 veteran-owned businesses with 10 or more employees.
wow,
400,000. And
that's a good market, Dean.
I mean, we have hundreds of clients that fit that bill, but I wasn't necessarily the best student at West Point, but when I do the quick math, that means we're working with 0.1%, 0.1% of our total addressable market. So that less is more really having our niche. I mean, the new mantra for me is the riches are in the niches. And we are laser focused on who our target customer is.
I've heard that. Definitely heard that for sure. So invariably, of course, so you're kind of talking about not a mistake or anything, but we all have pivotal moments where things could have gone one way or another. So you said you're really tired. And I'm curious, what were some of those pivotal moments for you? I mean, even in making the decision, why don't you share with our audience how you approach that? Making the decision to go from where you were making dress uniforms to starting a brand of your own.
So Nancy, if as a refresher back in 2017, there were really two different paths.
Mm.
So, my partner and I parted ways from the uniform company, had a vision to build this iconic American brand, but there's inherently a lot of risk when you're starting a business from scratch from a blank sheet of paper. So also had an offer to lead a company that was owned by a private equity firm.
Right.
That would, likely be very financially lucrative. But you had
You
asked,
wouldn't be able to spend time with your family, as I recall, right?
I mean, that was a big part of it. But the other part of it too is, what? It was different from, the big Fortune 500 company days, but it really wasn't that because I was working for somebody else. And it was really about, how do you maximize, your income statement, your profit? How do you maximize shareholder value? And back to the question you asked about one of the things I loved from serving in the military was that higher sense of purpose, raising my right hand and committing to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. I mean, that higher sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately drove me to pursue Authentically American because, the heart of our mission, if you go to our website, is all about creating American jobs. We just happen to be in the apparel business. So that's why it's exhausting. I mean, building something from the ground up, everything I took for granted at P&G and Mars, the systems, the process, supply chain, everything, we've had to build from the ground up. But I'm even more energized Nancy, I know
It,
we're,
it's really impressive what you've done, Dean, just in that amount of time since 2017. I mean, it's just, and you're all over the place. You're on, people are interviewing, like me, interviewing you all the time on different news shows and such. So you're getting some really great exposure. And I think that, oh, well, people love people like you, just like a real American, like West Point and the Army Rangers. And now you're building this brand and serving veteran owned businesses. I mean, people love things like that because we just feel, there's a lot of fracture right now in America. And that this feels like something that's pulling people together.
Well, I appreciate that, Nancy. Let me share one story that dovetails on, your sentiments, because after 1 year in business, we realized that we're onto something. You know what? We've got some momentum. We've got something to build. But thinking back to the P&G and Mars days, we literally had Super Bowl ad budgets. I mean, massive
Oh, yeah.
marketing budgets. But my marketing budget is about this big because we're self-funding it. And there was an assessment. Well, what do we do? How do we get the word out? And the thought was that we play the earned media card and try and get as much free press and PR as we can. And was blown away because very quickly we had an invite to be a guest on Fox and Friends.
Yeah.
And
They have a lot of viewers who would be very open to what you're doing. So
yeah, and what's astounding, Nancy, it was 2 million. 2 million viewers tune in every morning. And not that it went perfect, but I'll tell you a fun story because it reinforces, hey, it's great to have a story, but really what's most important. So, that was back in 2018 and met a number of people. And one person I met backstage was Pete Hegseth. So
I'm sorry, who?
Pete Hegseth is his name.
Okay.
And he's one of the hosts of Fox and Friends, and he's a fellow Army veteran. So I gave him a pair of our socks. I gave him this fun pair right here. One is red, one is blue, and it's got a fun patriotic design. So fast forward a year later, I was invited back and Pete was interviewing me. And he's like, Dean, it is so great to see you again. I still have the socks you gave me. I wear them all the time. They're my favorite pair. And I said, Pete, please say that on national TV.
Yeah, while you're interviewing me, yes.
And Nancy, he did.
He did. Oh, good.
And you can imagine the spike in traffic and sales. And I actually love what he said because he didn't mention anything about them being American made. He said they're so soft, so comfortable. They have this fun patriotic design. That's why they're his favorite pair. But when you have an experience like that, you want to learn more and you'll read the fine print that says designed in Nashville, made in North Carolina. Back to your initial question. And what's fun with socks? I say that nobody wears ties anymore. Socks.
Socks are the fashion statement these days.
Oh, yeah.
For men, anyway, yeah.
And back to that 90% of our revenue being custom apparel. Our customers use socks for fun employee gifts, to help drive employee engagement, or they're using them for client gifts because, this is our own design, fun, patriotic. We'll wipe all this off and whatever color, whatever brand, whatever logo you want, we can do.
Well, that's great. That's amazing. Yeah, because that would make great customer gifts. So okay, so just to kind of get it in a nutshell, how would you say you're using your influence to impact the world?
So I think it starts at home. That's where I want to have the biggest impact, want to be an amazing husband, want to be an incredible dad. And I think that's where it starts. And I truly believe if you have a strong foundation at home, the rest of life is going to be that much easier. But here's where, I believe we're just right in the first chapter, Nancy, because it's been a long, challenging 6 years with COVID and finding our way, identifying our niche and building everything. But I think now is where the real impact and influence, because it's not just been once, on Fox and Friends. We've been on Fox and Friends multiple times, Fox Business, MSNBC, Newsmax. We've been in Forbes magazine. So we're reaching a broader audience. But I think as we continue to grow and our brand expands, I think more people who also believe in the American worker who want to make a difference, I think that's where, the true impact isn't going to be measured today. The true influence isn't today. It's 5 years, 10 years from now, even 20 years from now, when we look back and say, okay, what impact have we had? So if you'd have me, if you're still doing your interviews, would love 5 years from now and 10
Yeah,
years from
we'll have a date 5 years
now.
from now. Exactly. Well, I love what you're doing. I absolutely love the idea that, it's American made and providing people jobs and serving veterans. And, I really admire you, Dean, a lot for what you've done and how committed you are. It's rare. So, you're an inspiration. Thanks. So
I appreciate that, Nancy. And can I show you one more product? Because
please,
it is
absolutely.
ultimately what's most important because we're a consumer brand.
Mhm.
And we've talked a lot about being veteran owned and American made, but if somebody tuning in, goes to our website, buys a product, and they're like, Nancy, thanks a lot. The product stinks. I mean, who cares? Who
Yeah,
cares?
show us something else. Yeah.
They will never buy again. So, I shared not my feedback, but Pete's feedback on it being his favorite pair of socks.
Mhm.
The most ubiquitous, the most common apparel item is the t-shirt.
Hmm.
And I'll show you one. I'd mentioned, having, individual consumer items, but we also have collegiate licenses. So for example, we have Army, Navy, Air Force. And I'm going to show you one of my favorite t-shirts. Can you see that okay?
Go Army.
Go Army for sure.
Man, yeah.
And I wish, Nancy, we were here in person because if you could feel this, you'd be like, Dean, that has got to be the softest t-shirt I've ever felt. And who doesn't love a nice soft t-shirt? And it's not just the fabric, it's the print to include tagless.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's important.
everything about our t-shirts and is incredibly soft.
Yeah.
But this one has some innovation, our sweat activated print innovation. So I'm glad your talk is visual because I'm going to show you how this works. I'm going to spray this shirt and watch what happens.
Oh,
Go
whoa,
Army,
whoa, whoa. What does it say? Well, I'm reading it backwards because of the way the camera's doing. But
beat Navy. So go Army, beat,
Big Navy.
and
I
then
have
on the
to.
back,
Yeah.
Nancy, there's our vintage U.S. flag, and it's even bigger.
Beat Navy. That's
And,
amazing. I
and
should get one of those for my husband because when he works out, it's more than a spray bottle.
yes,
So
and
anyway, well, that's
people
so innovative.
and literally people say, Dean, wow, that is
That is,
truly incredible. It's my new favorite shirt. It's so incredibly soft and comfortable in that innovation. And, back to that 90% being custom,
yeah,
whatever you want printed, whatever you want magically to appear, we can do.
I love
And we have done hundreds of custom designs.
it.
And, one thing to highlight the power of focus because, you know, we're focused on that 90% custom t-shirts for businesses. And I truly believe, small businesses, middle market companies, that's the engine of our economy. That's what drives
And you're right. Yeah.
innovation.
Mhm.
So small businesses can't order thousands. So very intentionally, our minimum is only 24.
Okay.
So it's a very low hurdle for a small business who wants a custom shirt, wants it American made. But back to that veteran focus, it's not only veteran owned small and middle market companies, but big Fortune 500 companies have what they refer to as veteran resource groups.
Okay.
So that's been our entry point into these bigger Fortune 500 companies. That's our beachhead. And these small little resource groups and these big companies have thousands of veterans.
Mhm.
And because of that innovation, it's opened some doors. So last year we had a top 10 accounting firm order 27,000,
Oh,
not 24, 27,000 t-shirts. So,
yeah.
less is more. Having, that niche is really helping us grow and really be focused and
Wow, that's
catapult for
amazing.
the future.
Yeah, that's really a good story. And so there a lot of small business owners are on LinkedIn and watching this. So where would they go if they wanted to order? Um,
So the best place to go, Nancy, is on LinkedIn. You can very quickly look up me. All my information is there. You can reach out to me. You can message our company, but either way, message me, message the company, and then we can introduce you to my team. And then that's the other part that we don't even have time to talk about is, after product experience, if you're a business or a charity and you're working with us, we want to deliver that incredible customer experience, similar to the white glove approach you do when you help authors, write a book.
yeah. Well, and those of you who are listening, I encourage you to do that. Go, connect with Dean. Find out how you can really support American made businesses and perhaps order gifts for your customers or something for your employees and all. I think that It would give you a lot of satisfaction too, knowing that you're supporting our own people, so, and not something that's made in China. So Dean, to wrap it up, I want to ask you a few rapid fire questions
Oh,
to help the audience get to know you in a different way. So are you ready?
let's do it.
Okay, cat or dog?
So, all about dogs. Not that I'm not a cat person, but we have an amazing young Aussie Doodle at home named Simba.
Oh, cool. Okay, so coffee or tea?
I'm coffee, having ranger school like hours like right now, so we need a little
Oh my gosh,
caffeine.
you probably had to take it intravenously when you only got 2 hours of sleep a night.
Yes.
Okay,
So we
summer
enjoy
or summer
coffee.
or winter?
So I used to be a winter person, being a hockey
Oh,
player
hockey in New York.
ranger school and trudging through the swamps in 30-degree weather. I now love a nice warm summer day.
You know what? I think I've told you that my daughter and her family live in Nashville. They have 4 kids. And
Yes.
she and her husband, this is the summer or winter thing. She and her husband went skiing. It was in February, and they were gone for a week. So I was staying with the kids. And do you know that you guys had like 4 or 5 inches of snow in Nashville? They did not go to school one single day. I was like, wow, there's 4 of them. You're used to that because you have
I
4
remember
here.
that, absolutely.
Anyway, so we had a lot of fun. Okay, next question.
Yes.
Netflix or movie theater?
So I enjoy Netflix, but even more, I enjoy the theater because it's part of the experience. We
Yeah.
talked about product experience, we talked about customer experience, but I love, sitting in the big theater and that big tub of popcorn and just enjoying a good movie.
Okay, casual night in or fancy night out?
So it's less about what I'm doing, it's more who I'm doing it with. So if I'm doing it with my wife, I will take any one of them, but we have a fun routine right now. The Nashville Business Journal publishes the top 25 restaurants in Nashville. So once a month, we're hitting a new one just
You
as a
pick a
fun
new
day.
one. That's a
Yep,
great idea. Okay. Window or aisle seat?
definitely aisle.
Okay, morning person or night owl?
So I am definitely a morning person and, back to God, family, country. I want to be home for dinner with the family. I want to be home to coach our kids. I don't want to miss any of their activities. So the only way I can do that and also keep up with all demands at work is get up at some crazy hours and get things before everyone else even starts their day.
Well, that's great. So, okay, Dean, you are a man of many talents. So tell us, what is something you cannot do?
So American Idol is going on right now, and I love to belt out a good song, loud as, and even my own kids, Nancy, will hate my singing. So that is definitely one thing, and it's
So you
opposite
can't sing?
one bit, not one bit.
That's so funny because whenever I ask that question, more people have answered with the word sing than I had expected. So, well, Dean, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, I really admire you. I love what you're doing. Tell us your website address, if you would, real quick.
So authenticallyamerican.us, and that .us is an intentional choice given the equity of our brand. So you can go to our website and find me or connect with our company. As we mentioned, you can also go to LinkedIn and find me. But Nancy, it's not only if you want to be a customer, you want to order your new favorite pair of socks or t-shirt, or if you want to be a business and partner with us. If there's anybody tuning in that's, in the middle of an entrepreneurial journey or is considering that and I can help, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Dean. That's very generous of you. So, connect with Dean, go to their website, order some socks and t-shirts and whatever you might be able to pass out to your employees or friends. Let's support him in all that he's doing. On another note, if you or someone you know wants to write a book, you can find my contact information in my LinkedIn profile. And then there's also a link to schedule a strategy session where we can just chat about your book ideas. So you've been watching Masters of Influence with Nancy Erickson. See you next time.